I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly, beginning with a roll call.
Mr. Coffey. I'm here. Dr. Selcraig. Mr. Starr.
Here.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Here.
Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Drummond. Present. Ms. Osiander. Here. Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Clayman.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Birch, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any announcements? Oh, I'm sorry, there are minutes. Just a second.
Move to approve the minutes of October 27th.
Is there discussion on the minutes? Is there any objection to accepting the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes of October 27th are unanimously accepted. Thank you. Now, Mr. Mayor, do you have anything to report to us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just last week, obviously, Thanksgiving. Hope everybody had a joyous Thanksgiving. And Friday, we had the wonderful opportunity, myself and the First Lady, to host the military reception for our military members and their families at the PAC. The First Lady and friends made hundreds of scarves for the children of our military families, and just a great turnout, great reception, and folks on my staff and other volunteers made it a great success. Followed immediately by the tree lighting ceremony in Town Square, and our friends at the Downtown Partnership and volunteers from throughout the community just had a huge crowd down there and a great community success. So I want to thank everybody who was involved in both those events.
Thank you. I have been, I guess, struggling to try to be as fair as possible and also to answer concerns regarding Mr. Wheeler's report to us. I received an email from Ms. Phillips. Actually, I got it yesterday, and it says that there's a number of concerns that were not addressed. I also understand that there's some concern that some of the documents that were, or points made in the Wheeler's report are not accurate. And I really don't want to dominate this entire meeting with that discussion. So I have called a work session on January 8th from 1 to 3. It seems to me that it would be better for us to deal with this in a more organized fashion. I've asked Ms. Weddleton to give us a document that talks about what she thinks is inaccurate, and I've given Mr. Wheeler Ms. Phillips' email so that he can respond so we don't have just things flying all over the place. So it was my hope that this whole issue can be postponed, but we'll see what the Assembly agrees to do on that when it comes up on the agenda. It's certainly still on the agenda. Other than that, there is another meeting that's been called, another work session that's been called on January 8th there's been a request from Mr. McGee in Property Assessment to talk to us about the 2010 tax rolls and assessment, and so I've called that one for the hour before at noon. So that one would be from noon to 1 on the 8th.
Which date?
On the 8th, yeah.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
December 8th?
No, this January 8th, which is Friday.
Oh,
I wanted to deal with some earlier, but we are losing members rapidly who are leaving for the holidays. I know we're going to be down 3 people, I believe, on the 18th, which is when we have the work session with the school board. Oh, that's what, joint meeting? Joint meeting, not a work session. Pardon me. I spoke inaccurately. That one is on the 18th, and the time on that one was noon, wasn't it? 12:30 to 2:30, and it's at the school district headquarters. Now, I know that several of you can't make it, but hopefully we'll still have a fairly decent turnout to talk to the school board on the 18th. I do have jury duty that week, but I plan to attend if I can. I believe on our meeting, on our agenda this evening, you all should just have received the legislative program, since obviously we haven't read it. I'm anticipating that that would be postponed until the 15th. Is that right, Mr. Flynn? The administration has asked to rework Delta 17. Additionally, I know Ms. Drummond has an announcement about 11A. There's been a request to continue the 14J item until the first meeting in January. There's also an intent on 13K, and I apologize for jumping around. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, could you say 14J?
No, K,
K,
the
thank you.
publication. Wait a minute. No, J. I'm sorry, I misspoke. J. That's the publication one not a news.
Till January?
Till the first meeting in January.
Okay.
And then the Title 21, the second part that we bifurcated would also be in January. And Mr. Coffey will talk more about that during committee reports. All right. With that, I will go down. Mr. Coffey, you want to start with your committee report?
Yes. Title 21 committee. First thing is we had a mistake relative to an email that went out relative to the times of the meetings at Title 21 committee. Our meetings are at the Permit Center. They're from 9:15 to 11:45 on Thursday. We will meet on the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th. That's the schedule so far as it goes, at 9:15 to 11:45. I went to the clerk's office today, and I think that's corrected. That's number one. Number two, we have two sections left in Chapter 7 that deal, one with parking and another with lighting. It will be the committee's recommendation to the body that insofar as lighting is concerned, we will wait for the appearance of the model code, which is being worked on, and that we will reserve the lighting section until then. We are also, when it comes up on the agenda here tonight, we will move to continue the public hearing on the other section, parking, 090, till January 12th meeting, to allow two things to happen. One, for the committee to review that one more time and prepare any amendments we may have so that those are available when we take the public testimony and go on. Now, the committee will be dealing with commercial design standards starting in this next 3 sessions before the end of the year. And we'll have to talk about when we will do the 090 stuff so that it'll be ready for the January 12th public hearing. And so just stay tuned. We're going a work in progress week by week. Madam Chair?
Thank you. Dr. Selkirk, anything? Mr. Starr?
Yeah, from elections, I understand we're posted for a elections clerk. I was hoping to get a public update from the clerk or from yourself as to where we're at with the elections coordinator and elections clerk.
Do you want to say?
The elections coordinator, we just got the applications in today, and we're looking over them. There's a couple of candidates that look pretty strong, so we have not even called them ready for an interview. We're just starting to look quickly at the resumes.
So timeline would be sometime.
I'd love to interview this week if we can get it done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for doing that.
Mr. Gutierrez, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Birch?
No report.
Ms. Drummond?
Nothing.
Ms. Johnson?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Flynn?
Sorry to break the streak, Madam Chair. Just quick up, you noted that everyone has their draft legislative program in front of them today. If possible, we'd like any comments or proposed amendments from the members by the close of business on Monday the 7th.
Email to you or
To the clerk.
to the clerk?
Please.
Okay.
And she'll forward them to the legislative committee.
Okay.
And we'll take them up that week in time for the December 15 meeting for final consideration, which means I'll be pulling 9B1, just in case you're wondering.
Very good.
That's all.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Clayman?
Nothing, Madam.
All right. I'd like a motion to incorporate.
Second.
Thank you. Is there objection to incorporation?
She was her.
Seeing none, I'll read those items into the record. For introduction, item 9F3 would be AR 290. It's a resolution appropriating $840,138 from the Federal Highway Administration via the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the state DIR/FED pass-through grants for Anchorage Metropolitan Area Transportation Solution. Public hearing on that is December 15th. Additionally, new public hearings, item 9G2, AO129S. This is a substitute version for increasing existing fares in the public transportation system. I should have announced, by the way, that this item, there will be a motion to postpone because all the fare discussion is somewhat wrapped into the budget. With an accompanying assembly memorandum, pardon me. Also, I'm not additionally going to read the last one because that item is going to be reworked by the administration, so I'm not, unless someone objects, I'm not going to add that, as Ms. Gray-Jackson suggested.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That will work. Yeah, that'll work. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, those are the items on the addendum. And now a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Klayman, do you want to start with items to pull? Wait a minute, please. My pen just vanished. Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
The only item I would pull is, and I think that was, I heard a comment that 9 Delta 17 was going to be reworked. So I would pull 9 Delta 17 for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Klayman.
That's all I have.
Yes. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Flynn?
As promised, 9 Bravo 1.
Very good.
No, thank you.
Ms. Drummond?
Nothing from the consent agenda, Madam Chair, but item 11A, notice of reconsideration. I just want to tell you that I want to abandon my request for reconsideration, and therefore I will not be calling up this item, and I would appreciate if nobody else does either, and it will just die. And there will be work done on IDs and liquor licenses in package stores. In
Point of order, Madam Chair.
State your point.
Well, it's not on the consent agenda.
I know, and I apologize. I asked Ms. Drummond to announce that at the beginning of the meeting so that people who are here for that would know. And so I was allowing her to do that.
I
But
appreciate
you are
that.
correct, sir.
Yes.
It's not on the consent agenda.
It'll be
She wasn't
perfect.
pulling it. She was just announcing.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Drummond?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Mr. Birch?
No items.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Starr?
9 Echo 1.
Dr. Selkrig?
9D18. 9D, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards here. 9D10, 9D11, and 9D18.
3, right?
Yeah, 3.
10, 11, and 18?
Yes.
Okay.
D is in Delta.
D is in Delta.
Delta, right. Mr. Coffey?
9E8.
9E8. Okay. I'll go over those to make sure that I got them correct. 9 9B1 by Mr. Flynn, and then 9 Delta 10 and 11 from Dr. Selkrig, 9 Delta 17, Mr. Klayman, 9 Delta 18, Dr. Selkrig, 9E1, Mr. Starr, 9E8, Mr. Coffey. Did I miss anything? Okay. With that, is there objection to approval of the rest of the consent agenda minus those items? Seeing none, the consent agenda minus those items is passed unanimously.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Starr?
did we just bypass the minutes, or did I miss that approval?
We did the very beginning.
Okay, I missed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have now appointed a number of people to boards and commissions in that mass of approvals in the beginning in the consent agenda. If you are here because of a board or commission, we would very much appreciate it if you'd come forward and you'd introduce yourself and tell us which board you're willing to serve on so we can thank you and meet you. So if you were appointed to a board or commission just now, please come up. Thank you.
Nancy Grosek, Library Advisory Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service.
Ms. Grossi?
Oh, just a minute. There's a question for you.
Not a
Hold on.
question. I just know that you don't live far away, and I know libraries have been your passion for years.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
it's great to have you on this commission.
Thank you, sir.
Jim Yergin, Library Advisory Board.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Serena O'Donnell, and I'm appointed to the Board of Building Regulation Examiners and Appeals.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
I just wanted to welcome Serena
Oh.
to the board.
Mr. Birch here.
Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
Anna Wiczorek, Youth Advisory Commission,
Very good. Which high school?
West High School.
Very good.
I could have told you that.
Well, I didn't know.
Ron Crowell, Transportation.
Thank you for doing this.
John Thornley, Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
Important one. Thank you.
Tommy Ian, Youth Advisory Commission.
Thank you. And what school?
South High School.
Very good.
Blake Avery, Youth Advisory Commission.
And what school?
South.
Aha. Okay. Thank you. Yep. Thank you for doing this. We so much appreciate your willingness to do this kind of work. The way our system of government is set up here in Anchorage, we are so dependent on our boards and commissions. You're doing an invaluable service. Sometimes it's, I believe, gets insufficient recognition. So this is a very limited way to say thank you for your willingness to give time to the rest of the citizens in this town. Thanks. All right. Dr. Selkrig?
I just want to comment. The library board's attendance sheet was passed out tonight, and it's really an impressive attendance sheet. I mean, there's been very few people missing very few meetings, and I think it probably speaks for most of our boards. And I just want to kind of note that this is really a big time commitment, and I'm appreciative, and I know we are as a body.
And I'll seize that to thank the administration very much for giving us now the attendance sheets. It's a useful tool, and I appreciate the effort to do that. Thank you. All right. Mr. Flynn.
Do you need a motion to approve and then a motion to postpone, or
Yes,
simply
sir.
Okay.
Oh, well, I think
So-
that would be best.
In that case, I will move to approve, and then I'll secondarily move to postpone consideration of this item to our meeting on December 15th.
Second.
Is there objection to that? Seeing none, the date is set then for the 15th.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Selkrig, Delta 10?
All the items that I pulled this evening are related to IT expenditures. I move to approve.
Second.
And item 10 is a $2,900,000 purchase, and it, and I read the information about it. It deals with a variety of systems and long-term relationships, and there's nothing wrong per se that I could assess with this item, except that my experience on this as an assembly person has been that over the time I have sat in this chair, we have approved millions and millions and millions of dollars. And these software packages are structured so we invest in it and then we make a commitment to this technical assistance that's very expensive, probably not for the industry, but certainly for an item that we review. And what would be very useful, I think, for not only me but maybe others on the Assembly is to have a work session and to review what our commitments are here. What's the totality of this commitment? We agreed to a $50 million loan that's also addressed in that, a system. And and we've borrowed a substantial amount of money. We've paid it down, but I believe we've paid it down through IGCs, basically through the other departments have paid off the costs associated with these software. And considering where we are and that we didn't have $37,000 to run buses on a holiday, I think every dollar counts, and that there might be some opportunities here to make some choices about maybe slowing down some of these expenditures in terms of what our economic situation is. I mean, we're talking about refinancing debt. We've got a variety of strategies, and this is an enormous amount of money. So my request to the body is to actually postpone action, and I guess I'm open to hear from the administration if there's something critical here that isn't $2 million. I pulled several items. I'd be happy to have a different strategy, but my recommendation is that we postpone action at least on 10 until after we've had a work session to get a handle on what our overall commitments are associated with these very large IT contracts and purchases that we've made over the last 2 years.
Dr. Sokrig, I just asked the clerk for available dates
Thank
for
you.
work session. And the first one, obviously, is the 18th, when I know you're not
Thank you.
here. So that doesn't work very well.
No.
And then the 8th is full, so the 15th is the first.
January
15th.
That would be okay with me. I understand there are probably some issues. I don't know what the issues are around the items on the agenda. So maybe we should talk about this during break with the administration about how to approach this.
Okay, maybe we could immediately find out if there are, what the implications would be of delaying this one.
Ms. Mahoney will address that.
Yeah. First of all, on 9010, what we're doing here is we are just entering into a contract. We're not actually encumbering any funds. What we're doing is we've negotiated a contract where we piggyback on the state of Alaska so that we get a bigger discount.
Right.
But in this particular 9010, we're not actually spending any money, at least not yet. However, there is a need at the permit center to replace the infrastructure. And so eventually, as was documented on the back, we will need to spend some money. They went without any internet connectivity for a full day just last week, which is really negative in terms of the impact to productivity. The infrastructure out there is very old.
So if this were approved, are we committed actually to this amount at some point?
This is the maximum amount allowed on the contract, at least as it's currently negotiated. We would not be able to spend above this. And any expenditures related to this would be approved in either the budget process as an expense or in the capital project, and we would come to you separately for those specific expenditures.
If we approve this contract and decide not to spend any of this money, is that possible?
Well, I would need to really go into the details of what we would spend between what would be expense and what would be capital. Because if it's expense and it's approved at the department level, then it would be appropriate.
I'm just really reluctant to make a commitment. Because this is over a series of, 2 million, 3 million, 2 million. So if this were postponed, our next meeting is, if this were postponed to the 8th, then we had an opportunity to review.
We can certainly have a work session and talk about IT expenditures. But another important thing to understand in regard to licensing is we have to license our software annually. And it's a cost of doing business when you're in the IT world in terms of annually going in and paying your licensing fees.
But the $2,900,000 is not for licensing.
No, that's correct.
Right. I guess I feel like there's a need to understand what we're doing in a more holistic way, because there's a lot of money already committed, and this is not the first of these we've seen. So would it be possible to postpone this till? I'd like to postpone this till next week to get some answers.
Yeah. That's
okay.
Fine.
Thank you.
That's fine.
December 15th. To the 15th, you mean?
Yeah. And then if it looks like we need a work session, then we could set one up for the 15th. I'd like to our next meeting, right?
What do we have on the 11th?
Just a minute, I'm
If
having
it's just
multiple
like-
suggestions. Okay. The clerk informs me it has to be the 15th. It can't be on the 11th because the special meeting was called for one purpose.
Right.
So on the 8th. But on the 15th, that's 2 weeks. Now, I'm a little bit unclear. I thought that you had requested a
I
work
did.
session on the global, but you want to wait on that?
Well, what's not clear to me is how critical it is that we act on this in terms of time. That's what I mean, if there's some critical issue here that I need to understand from the perspective of the administration, I'm glad to talk with them about it. Would it work for the administration for us to postpone this to the 15th or after so that we could hold a work session in January?
No, December.
No.
Is this, are you also?
No, we're talking about, it's my understanding that our meeting, we can't have a work session before the 15th, right? Is that what you just said? Could you go through that again, please?
Well, I guess potentially we could the 11th. I'm not available, but other people could. So we could have a work session on the 11th.
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid times when people are gone.
Right.
So which leaves a whole big blank over the holidays. The next real opportunity is the 8th, which now already has 3 hours of work sessions on it. And so the 15th is what I suggested, January 15th, to get the global overview. But it's your motion, whatever, I mean, if you would prefer to have a work session on
January
December
15th is fine with me.
Okay.
But what I'm asking the administration is, will that work for them?
Madam Chair, we were thinking you were talking the 15th of December. We can certainly take this up the 15th of December and have a work session prior to that meeting.
That didn't work, I thought, for Dr. Selkrig.
If that will work for me, except it means it didn't work for you, you weren't going to be there on the 14th. Or what day were you?
No, Friday is the 11th.
Friday is the 11th. What's the day? Okay, so the question is what does the 11th look like? I thought it was full.
There's nothing.
No, there's nothing. I just have a personal commitment on the 11th.
All right, thanks. There's just too many days floating around. So I'm happy to do that if it works for this body, if they feel like they can show up for, okay, that would work for me.
All right, we can do a work session on the 11th. Now.
Thank you.
So the work session's set. The question now is, have you made a motion on this matter?
I'd like to postpone this item until the 14th. 15th. I'm looking at a schedule here.
Hit the button, Dr. Selkirk.
Oh, I'm looking at next year's schedule. Thank you. Thank you.
Second.
All right, that matter is before us. Is there discussion? Is there objection? I'm sorry, Mr. Klayman.
Just a question for the administration, and you don't need to answer it till the work session. Whenever I see contracts and you talked about basically piggybacking the state's purchase to get the best price, and I'm figuring that as long as we sign the contract by the end of the year, we probably get to piggyback, but that's one of the big issues I want to make sure you make clear at the work session. Is there a time issue that we get signed on to these by year's end? And if you could just answer that at the work session, that'll be more than adequate. Thank you.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Mahoney.
It's important to note that on number 11, in regard to the Oracle software licensing, if we don't proceed on that tonight, we will be faced with a 10% penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, let's just deal with the first one now. At the time, the motion is only to postpone D10. And the suggestion is to have the work session at noon on the 11th.
Okay.
Is there any opposition? Pardon me? Yeah. Is there any opposition to postponing this item? Seeing none? Oh, Mr. Coffey, you're in queue. I didn't know if that was for this.
I won't be here on the 11th, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Do you want to be here for this?
At this point, though, the motion is merely to continue this item, not on the work session, to continue this item to the 15th. So, seeing no objection, this matter is continued to the 15th, and we'll post a work session on the 11th. All right. The next item before us, Dr. Selkrig, is yours also.
Move to approve, and based on the information provided by the administration, I urge a yes vote.
Well, I need a second.
Second.
Thank
We need
you.
a button here.
Dr. Selkrig, could you push the button on the screen, please? Thank you. All right. Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, this item, Delta 11, is approved. Mr. Klayman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If my understanding is correct that the administration wants to resubmit this, I actually think no motion is in order because we don't want to
that's
introduce
fine.
it, we don't want to approve it, so it's pulled in.
That's fine by me. Mr. Vacalis, that's all right?
That is correct.
Okay. The next item then, it's not introduced. The next item is 9 Delta 18. Dr. Selkrig.
Move to postpone till December 15th. Move to approve. Do I have to do those?
Yeah, you have
okay.
to. You have to get it before.
There we go. Got it.
Okay. And Mr. Coffey was the second. Is that correct or not? All right. Now, Dr. Selkrig, make your motion.
I'd like to postpone this, move to postpone this till December 15th.
Second.
And that's seconded by Mr. Coffey. All right. Does the administration want to make a comment? No. Mr. Birch does, though. Go ahead.
Right. And I'd like this item to be combined.
Yeah. Hold on, Dr. Selkrig. Mr. Birch is next.
Sorry.
It's just an observation. I recall picking up our packages with all this information on the Wednesday preceding Thanksgiving, and I think, we've got a good process, and I just want to thank the administration for their willingness to respond in a timely manner, actually in advance of the Assembly meetings for any questions that come up during the process to kind of accelerate our review and consideration of these budget items. That said, I'll support the postponement if necessary for others to better understand the approach. And I think that we've got a good process in place already. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Selkrig.
I just want to note that it wasn't this specific item that concerned me. It's the cumulative impact of all the items like this that we've passed. What I'm really interested in is kind of an update on where we're at in IT in terms of our commitments with these big packages. So it seemed to me it was also valuable information for other Assembly people. So that's why I've handled it in this manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there objection to postponing this to the 15th? Hearing and seeing none, this matter is postponed to the 15th. I would request all Assembly members, if you have specific questions about IT, if you could submit that to the administration ahead of time so they know what to address in the work session, it would be very helpful. And I think the correct funnel is Mr. Vacalis there. So if you have anything in general you want answered on that work session or in specific, let Mr. Vacalis know. Thank you.
Madam Chair. And not only on the work session, but before a meeting, we'll gladly try and answer people's questions before the meeting so we can avoid postponing things. And we can answer a lot of these things ahead of time if we get the inquiries before the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right. The next item before us is 9E1. Mr. Starr?
I'd like to move to postpone acceptance of the item until January 12th.
Discussion?
Object.
There's objection? Okay. But no discussion. Mr. Klayman, you're in queue.
I'll just speak very briefly. I think this has gone on long enough. We've spent enormous resources. I think we need to be done and move forward. And so I think we should deal with this tonight. I do not support postponement.
All right. But seeing no discussion, I'm going to put this on the board.
So, Madam Chair, a no vote means we take it up tonight.
Mr. Birch?
One, two, three, four, 5. And the nays prevail, so it will not be postponed. All right. This matter is before us. Is there There's a move to accept before us. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion? Mr. Starr, go ahead.
You know, the item has significant importance, and I've been accused of pounding the ground. I've been accused of wasting taxpayer money. I've been accused of all things, and I don't want to lecture my fellow assembly members, but we have the obligation to provide, I believe, the checks and balances of government that exist between the legislative and the executive branch. And opportunities for us to get better at that are presented in findings such as this, however troublesome they may be. And when I see the CAFR report that was issued for 08, we got it in June, all of us got it. On page 3, it tells us that all 5 of our major funds were out of compliance with the policies that we've adopted. And I wonder how that happens. I don't find that that's a good thing. I find that all of our 5 major funds and their fund balances were lower than the required policy and were adjusted back into compliance through 2009 budgetary process. As diligent as we were and as many questions as we asked and all of the processes that went into budget reviews to quarterly reports to monthly summary reports, and this body still let overspending occur to dangerous levels, to 4.4% as opposed to the 8.25 or the 2 and 3. So that alludes to me as to how did that happen. And I don't believe that this is good government when it does happen. So I think the idea that we would want to sit down and go through it, talking about perhaps the observations of the report that said we were intentionally misled, those are brutal statements to have. Intentional or not, we weren't provided with the information that we needed to make good decisions. We need to change the processes that allow us to make good decisions. Quarterly reports, we're working on those. We're getting those. We got them back then. Did we get a fund balance report that makes sense to us? Some of the report observations in the supplemental talks about methodologies and how do those fund balance reports come into existence. If you remember, November 13th of last year, we got a fund balance report presented to us that said we had a $12 million surplus. We were doing just fine. How did we go into arrears 5 to 6 weeks later by millions and millions of dollars? I'd like to fix that so it doesn't occur again. But I can't do it tonight with the understanding that we even have a clear picture of what transpired. There's accusations in the report that intentional misleading that was conspired by others in the administration prior. Those are dangerous statements to make, and some of them should be handled either in executive session or with a clear opportunity to talk to this current assembly candidly on what they received. There's some inference that it came up in a committee report. You know, there's another observation that Ms. Phillips said today that she had, or in her letter to us, said that she had made some information available to the committee, Budget and Finance Committee. Now, if that's said, and we're not hearing that at the levels outside of these committees, then maybe we need to standardize our committee reports. There's a whole bunch of solutions that I see as required. I think there's also some legal ramifications that have come up in terms of our ability to assure the public that we have good checks and balances in government between this branch and the executive branch. That's not accusations, but that's an understanding that inadvertently, advertently, intentionally, or unintentionally, we were misled. We didn't get the information that we needed, and I don't want to let it happen again. I surely don't want it to happen on my watch that all 5 major funds come out of compliance. Blame it on the economy all you like. However, there was things that this body should have done and could have done had we been able to affirm the shortfalls were occurring, and that we needed to find that information out, not at first quarter budget adjustment after that, but early on. When the Treasury reports were being given to the executive branch, we need the mechanism that gives us those revenue reports at this mechanism to fix. September 26th shows up in Mr. Wheeler's report as when the findings were first identified to the previous administration. We gave away many, many months of being able to fix that shortfall problem last year. I do not want to get caught in that position again. It's our responsibility to fix it. I think a work session makes sense. I think January 8th takes it out of the drama of the budget periods that we're in. It allows a formal discussion. It allows Ms. Phillips to be present, and I think it's appropriate. That's why I moved to postpone. I think it's prudent to sit down in a forum that doesn't turn into be a kangaroo court or some other mechanism that doesn't produce the trust of the people that we represent. So I would urge that we don't get into it deep, that we keep the work session on, and that we deal with the issues that would produce better government and not more of the same.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one comment to make to Mr. Starr in terms of the committee and the Budget and Finance Committee and Ms. Phillips' comments. And when I was chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, there were minutes taken at every single meeting. And when Ms. Johnson took over as chair, I handed her a book with all of the minutes in a book. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Klayman.
I'll just speak very briefly. I had asked Mr. Wheeler last week to give a rough estimate of how many hours had been spent, both of his time and staff attorney time, and the numbers he provided me were 220 hours and 7 municipal attorneys, total staff, several more between IT and Department of Law staff, over $4,000 in transcription fees, paying an outside contractor to transcribe meetings. If I were to cost this out at reasonable fees in the private industry of providing legal services, which is the rest of my profession, the 60-page report would have cost a client somewhere in the nature of over $65,000 and would have taken over 220 hours of staff time and attorney time. And we're often asked in law practice to take a hypothetical question. Here the hypothetical question would be, assume that Mayor Begich didn't give all the information he should have. Don't investigate whether that's true or not. Assume that's the case. Is there anything that can be done? And Mr. Wheeler reached a conclusion in his 60-page report that there's nothing that can be done. And most clients that would come to me would say, give me a quick oral report on what can be done. I would assume the hypothetical, and I would answer the question, nothing can be done. And I would say, do you want a 60-page report for $65,000, or would you like a one-page report for about $1,000? And I can't imagine a client that pays my fees that would pay for the $65,000 report. I think this has been an incredible expenditure of municipal money. I think it's time to end this and move forward, and so I think it's time to accept this report, which doesn't mean we agree with it or disagree with it. It just means we've received it. There's been enough time spent, and we need to move forward and address the concerns of this city moving forward. So I didn't support postponing. I think we should accept this and move ahead. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
I'm going to be supporting the acceptance of this report. This action in no way reduces our capacity to put into place protocols that protect us from situations in the future that we have concerns about. And I think that we've spent not only the $65,000, but the money before that hiring a lawyer to get some evaluation in terms of what he thought the situation meant. And I keep reflecting on $37,000 last Friday for a bus, and it seems to me that we need to focus our energy right now on the tasks before us. And certainly one of those tasks is having the capacity on the Assembly to do independent evaluation, expecting orderly and good, strong reports from the administration that we've engaged with the administration about in terms of what we need. And I think a lot of those things are happening, and I think more of them are going to happen. I think ultimately it is time to accept this report. I mean, you can still take action to resolve issues you're concerned about beyond it, but I don't think there's anything gained in hashing through this. And I also think there's multiple perspectives on what occurred. I think that ultimately it's going to be he said, she said. There's going to be different perspectives, and we're probably not going to come to an agreed upon understanding of exactly what happened. It's just going to be a matter of perspective in many cases. So this report basically indicates that there's no next action that's required. It presents some information that poses troubling issues, and there are people that agree with it and disagree with it, but I don't think it serves the community to spend a greater amount of time on this. So I will be voting to approve it and to move on and address issues that are before us.
All right. There's Mr. Starr?
Well, it's obvious that my fellow Assembly members, for whatever capacity, don't want to debate the findings, don't want to debate the statements that are in there. I want to make an apology to the public for the work that we did last year. And I take a lot of responsibility for the over-budget conditions, and I'm starting to take responsibility for those that lost your jobs because of the responsibility that we didn't even follow through. And I tend to that with a lot of emotion. This isn't grandstanding or not. I take this job very seriously, and how I measure myself is what my job responsibilities are, and that is to candidly deal with the finances of the city, appropriately guide and make decisions that reflect that appropriately. And if you use the report card of what transpired at year end and into the first quarter and into now, I did not do my job, and I'll make a personal apology to those that I serve. I'll review the findings, I'll review what transpired, how I asked the questions, how I debated this body, and I pledge to do better. Thank you.
Mr. Coffey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Folks, don't make any mistake about it. This is a political deal. It's absolutely a political matter, and we are a political body, and some on this body don't want to know any more about what transpired, and some do. Some don't want to take any more time with it, and some do. And everyone's going to draw their own conclusions, so draw them as you would. I would urge you, as you draw their conclusions, to read the report and the documents that are associated with it. But I happen to be one of those who has unanswered questions that I would like to know the answers to for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, it is the duty and responsibility of this body to appropriate funds and to authorize budgets and to make certain that when we make decisions relative to appropriations and expenditures of public funds, that we do so with the full knowledge and information that is necessary to make those kind of reports. There's a big argument going on tonight about we had enough information. I don't mean tonight. I mean been going on for 2 months or so. We have enough information. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Again, everybody can draw their own conclusions, but this body needs to assert itself and be a formidable inquirer of the administration. We have to ask the hard questions and get the hard answers. And I think everybody who sits here, who's been through the last year, almost a full year, knows full well that that is required of us now. And the reason it is because trust has been lost. We asked questions and got deflected answers. We asked questions and got answers that were different than answers given to others who made inquiries. It's very problematic when our body cannot trust the people who work for the city to be forthright and candid. If anything is clear to me from reading the report, it's that we did not find it to be forthcoming, and we did not find the information to be candid. Now, in the end, trust is essential in government. We sit here on this body and we talk about how we're going to act and what we're going to resolve and what we're going to pass as ordinances. And if I say to Ms. Selcraig, yeah, I can go with that, I give her my word that I'm going to vote the way she would like because it's her ordinance or whatever, or she to me, or me to anyone else, or anyone else to me, we have to be able to count on our word as our bond. And I've given my word a couple of times when I wished I hadn't, but I had given my word. So I voted. I voted a way that reflected what I had told that person I would do. So that's between us. When it's between us and an administration, we have every right to expect full, complete, and accurate disclosure. That's what we need to have. I do not believe we got that. I don't believe we got anywhere near it. And I've said this before, you've got to draw your own conclusions on the why of it. I'm not sure the why really matters. The fact is, I think we should know the what of it, and if there are consequences from it, they should follow. They should fall on those who did things that were inappropriate. And I know from reading things in that report that a lot of hard questions were asked and a lot of answers were deflected and different. And we continue to find that existing more and more as time goes on. So other information has come out since the report. I don't think it's wise to accept this without promising to each other that we will continue to do what is necessary to ensure that this will not happen in the future, that we will not tolerate misrepresentation from the other branch of government, that when candor and forthrightness is not there, we will take action and not permit it to happen. If we don't do that, we might as well just all go home and let them do what they want. And what's our point? So I don't support, I don't have any problem with accepting the report. It is what it is, and that's that. But I will just tell this body that it ain't over. We're not done. So, just so everybody knows that, at least from my perspective. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler, I understand that you are working to develop an ordinance regarding reporting based in part on what your findings were. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Flynn, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I look forward to working with you on that, sir. Thank you. Madam Chair, I concur that accepting this report is the appropriate thing to do at this time. I concur that looking into our reporting standards needs to continue and working on the ordinance that Mr. Wheeler referenced. And with that, Madam Chair, I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but I feel I have to. Mr. Coffey raised some very good points, and he's absolutely right. Trust is critical. Trust is key. And I got to tell you, as I read through this report, Mr. Wheeler, I don't trust you anymore. I really don't. There are a lot of holes in this report. And Mr. Coffey's right also when he says this isn't over. I think we need to delve very deeply into this. There are a lot of places where there are simple things where you contradict yourself in one place or another. So-and-so didn't tell us this, but then you quote so-and-so telling us that. I think that and Mr. Coffey is also right in say this is all political. Everything's political. It's a political body. What we do is political. But I have a lot of questions. A lot of people who have information, who could have answered questions, weren't interviewed by you. There's a lot of important detailed information that you didn't seek for this report, and I'm curious to know why. And I don't want to waste the body's time going into that tonight. But this isn't over, and we need to look deeply into this. I've become fairly jaded since serving as an elected official. I saw this body as staff, so I saw a lot of the, people not being forthright and honest with one another and what happens when people can't trust each other. And so I guess I'm not entirely surprised that any given administration or another would intentionally play political games like this. But I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry. You do, sir. I just want to caution everybody to try. This has worried me. This is why I didn't want to talk. I don't want any personal attacks. I'd prefer on topic. And that's, you're close, but you haven't crossed.
I take that as a point well taken, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. There needs to be a lot more work done on this. I do support accepting this tonight. All we're saying is, it's a report. It is a report. But there's a lot of trust, I think, that's been lost on both sides, in both directions, on this issue. And you're going to have to work really hard, I think, to rebuild that. That's all, Madam Chair. There's lots more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to caution the whole body. There's potential for all kinds of hurtful things to be said. There's a potential for all kinds of statements to be made that could lead us into a call for executive session. I'll leave it at that. Mr. Klayman.
I'll stay well off the concerns. Mr. Wheeler, I know you're working on an ordinance. I actually have an ordinance that is before us tonight that I'm planning to postpone. And my suggestion is, rather than introducing separate ordinances, the reason I've been postponing it, I think, as you know, is because I actually want to kind of work through this with the administration to make sure that it serves the needs of both the Assembly's concerns, but it doesn't create a reporting requirement that will require us to hire 10 new people that do nothing but report to the Assembly every week on every minuscule detail of municipal finances, which would actually serve no one. And so my suggestion in terms of your working forward on an ordinance rather than introducing a different one, I would suggest you start with the one I've already introduced, and I'm more than happy to work with you. I've always anticipated there'll be a substitute version. So let's use that as the vehicle to move this forward. I know Ms. Tucker worked with me in getting that forward, and I think we'll actually be more effective if we work in that in a more collaborative manner, and I'm more than happy to work with you in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
I realize Mr. Clayman was being hypothetical with his cost of $65,000 for this report, but I thought we better clear that up because when I read the same memo, it wasn't $65,000, and I know that Mr. Wheeler worked on this on his own time mainly, and could you clear that up, please?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Johnston, as most of you, as all of you know, the attorneys on staff are salaried. So regardless of how much they work, they're paid the same. Same for myself. So nights and weekends and so forth that I spent working on this report are at no cost to the Muni because my salary is already set. So your fixed costs are the cost of the transcription, which are something over $4,000. I'll know better once I get the final invoices. The attorneys that I had work with me on particular portions of the report and read drafts. Their total sunk time is broken out for you, and it's, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's less than 50, 60 hours, I believe.
Anything else, Ms. Johnson? All right, Dr. Selkrig.
I think the pledges to get to the bottom of this ultimately are going to be divisive for this body, because I think that there are clearly good, decent people who see what happened differently. So it seems to me that there's a great opportunity here to put into place the rules and the regulations and the protocols that we feel will protect us from the events that occurred last year that have created this kind of anger and sense of disappointment in this body. So I'm committed to working in those areas. I think the act of accepting this tonight is simply acknowledging that Mr. Weber has put a lot of work into something. It's provided information. I do this acknowledging that there are clearly people who disagree with what's in the report, and it's my hunch that we can spend the next year working on this, and we're going to have disagreements about what happened, and that the real work here that we have before us is to work on the protocols to fix it, and also the issues that are before us right now having to do with the budget and the daily things of this body.
All right, no one else in queue. I'm going to put this on, Mr. Wheeler.
Motion is to accept.
Just a moment, please. Go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
Madam Chair, Assembly members, I just wanted to make a note before you vote, and that is that I would be happy to meet with anybody and review any material they have and answer any questions they have. My door has been, during the course of this investigation, open. Some people declined to be interviewed. I can't help that, but if Mr. Gutierrez or anybody else has questions or they want to discuss aspects of the report or present material they think I have not looked at, give me a call.
Okay. I want to thank you, Mr. Wheeler, and I want to thank you in my position for how forthright you've been every time I've called you with a question. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir. All right, at this point, I'm going to put this on the board. A yes vote will accept it, obviously. All right, that matter is accepted 10-1. Moving on. The next item before us is 9E8. Mr. Coffey?
Move to accept.
Mr. Coffey, go ahead.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
There was one, sir. Mr. Johnston seconded it.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to note very quickly, page 1, line 30 through 33.
Yes, sir.
The special note is Anchorage Fire Department, which has spent 65% of its overtime budget through October 23rd, which compares with 143% at this time last year. That was in 1908, 2008, 1908. That's when I was born, and that's why I forget what day it is. 2008. So they were 143% of their budget. It turned out to be about $800,000, if I'm not mistaken. And the Anchorage Police Department has spent, to this date, 60% of its overtime budget compared to 104% in 2008. I wanted to congratulate the acting chief, and I wanted to congratulate the chief of the fire department for managing their overtime appropriately, even in a period of time when we have declining officers and declining firefighters due to attrition and the fact that we haven't hired anybody for about a year. Again, I didn't do it. That's for them. They did it. But
Thank you.
Hang on. You know, well, here's what's troubling about it. We got contracts in December of 2008 for the fire and police. We just dealt with 140 side deals that created a lot of benefits. We got contracts 6 months before they expired, and I got demonstrable evidence here that the previous administration was allowing overtime to run absolutely wild. Again, this is one of those things, draw your own conclusions, folks. But I wonder who was rewarding whom and for what. So let's think about it. And let's watch it. And if this administration ever does anything like that, then let's come down on them like a ton of bricks, because we can't let them do this to us. You know what that means? They were spending money that was not appropriated, which is a misdemeanor under our law. Class B, 90 days in jail or a fine. What's going on? That's another thing we just have to follow up on and ask about. Thank you very much.
Ms. Fresca, I saw your light on, but then it went out. Did you want to make a comment? Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a moment and thank my colleague, Assemblymember Clayman, because when he was acting mayor for the first 6 months of this year, I did, from reading reports, see some improvements in our overtime budget. So, Mr. Clayman, thank you for that effort.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would remind folks that as I recall, one of the biggest reasons the fire department incurred tremendous overtime last year is they had a baby boom. A lot of those young fellows and young men and women were starting families, and so a lot of people were taking their Family and Medical Leave Act, and so I presume that the chief has convinced them to keep their families to perhaps one, and that's why we're not spending as much overtime this year.
Mr. Gutierrez, I don't think we want to pursue that question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Selkirk.
I also want to applaud the work that's been done this year. I mean, I do think that the departments themselves have really engaged in thinking of ways of being more efficient. I know that it started last January, and I know that the administration is committed to that. So I think it's a positive thing. I don't have a need to kind of look over my shoulder and be outraged at the past. I think the good news is that we are capable as an organization to pull together and to find savings, and I think we're going to find more savings. And I think that this is partly what happens when money is tight. When money rolls and when there's a lot of money around, it's odd how quickly it can get spent. And when we have less money, it's amazing how much we can do with the money. And so I applaud both Mr. Clayman's work and Mayor Sullivan's work, and I think that we have to be positive about this and assume that there's more to come and there's more savings to come, and that's not necessarily a great indication of failure somewhere, but really a statement of what our workers can do when they put their mind to it and when they're inspired to do it. So good work, police, and good work, fire. Thank you very much.
Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to note that this report, the monthly financial report, as well as the one that follows it, which we've already approved, monthly investment reports to the Assembly, I believe were requested by this body, and they were not given as frequently as they are now. So we have been doing our job, and we've been benefiting from these reports on a far more regular basis than was the custom previously. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, I want to make a brief comment. I appreciated this report, too, and I particularly wanted to point out to the Assembly, we've had a lot of discussion about revenues, and the administration this time really looked carefully at all the revenues to make sure they were online. But one particular one jumped out to me, that tobacco tax, which I mentioned as a potential budget amendment. You remember that? It's $1 million more than last year. So I just thought I'd float that out there.
Point well taken, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right.
Would you like it spent in Eagle River and Shugiak?
Sure, Mr. Coffey. All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, is there any objection to acceptance of this report? Seeing none, the report is accepted. The next item before us, let's see, we were going to, as was previously announced, that ends the consent agenda, by the way. But the next item before us would be 11A, and as previously announced, Ms. Drummond is not going to take any action there.
A motion to ignore, Madam?
Well, I was just going to announce that and then do it, if that was all right.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, hold on one second.
Madam Chair, point of order. If we don't take some action, will the clerk carry it over till the next time?
No, it'll die.
Thank you.
Ms. Drummond, do you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I asked for reconsideration of this item during the last meeting when we asked Brown Jug to ask for identification at each purchase of their new store at Tikotnu Commons, which was at the request of the Community Council, the Northeast Community Council. And I didn't think about it too carefully, but I pulled this one because there is a package store on this group of license renewals, and I have rethought that since then and had some conversations with fellow Assembly members as well as our attorney, and I will be working on an ordinance regarding identification and package store purchases separately. These liquor license renewals should be allowed to go forward, and therefore I will not be calling up this item and respectfully request that the body respect that and abandon my request for reconsideration.
All right. There's nothing on the floor right now. Mr. Gutierrez, did you want to make a statement?
I did want to comment on that. As Ms. Drummond had mentioned, working on an identification ordinance, I am as well, so perhaps we should do this together. We'll pass it through the Public Safety Committee.
Very good. Thank you. All right. At this time, I'm going to ask the two individuals who had indicated they wanted to speak to us to come forward. The first one would be Angela Bourgeon. Are you here? I hope I pronounced that right. Ms. Bourgeon, are you here? She's not here, apparently. All right. Mr. Wilkerson, are you here? Tony Wilkerson. Well, neither of them appear to be here. If they come in the next 15 minutes, we will still hear them. So at this point, we're at 11B on the agenda. Ms. Gray-Jackson, that was your item, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to postpone this item until the meeting of January 12th.
Is there discussion?
Not really. I've been postponing it for a while, and basically because Mr. Clayman and you have an ordinance out there that does something similar to what my intent is. And I would like to see us come up with one document that's workable. So I would like to echo Mr. Clayman's comments to Mr. Wheeler. I'd probably like to also work with you on the document that you're producing because it ties in with my ordinance that's been on the out here for some time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there opposition to postponing this till January 12th? Seeing none, this matter is postponed until the 12th. The next item before us is 13A, and I'm trying to see what we did with that. Did we have a public hearing?
Yes. 13A, continued public hearing.
It's a continued public hearing.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
State your point.
It's about 18 after. Do we want to take up the appearance request before 6:30?
Mr. Clayman, I called them just about 2 minutes ago.
Oh, I apologize.
And I plan to call them one more time, just to make sure, but nobody stood up.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I was speaking with Mr. Wheeler and I wasn't listening.
Okay. All right. At this point, then, I'm going to open the public hearing on AR 221. This is a resolution revising and appropriating funds for the 2009 operating budget, the budget that we're in now. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to us on that matter? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make a few comments before I take any action on this ordinance, on this resolution.
Would you mind making a motion first, just to follow through with, and then make as many comments as you like, ma'am?
Move to approve, Madam Chair. Thank you. Anyway, as most of you probably know, I brought this resolution forward because I truly believe that the public needed to be involved in the process, in the public process. My interpretation of what the charter and the code says was another reason why I brought it forward, because the code says that if there are expenditures or decreases in the budget that are over $100,000, that we need to have a public hearing. And that was my intent. And my many years working with the municipality, I've seen this happen over and over and over again, except it didn't happen this time around, and so I brought it forward. But I feel today's December 1st. We have a month left to this year, and this budget does address the changes that happened for 2009, and most of them, the changes have already taken place. So the idea to go any further at this point really is a moot situation. In addition to the fact that we have a couple of ordinances out there right now, and Mr. Wheeler is going to work on something too that I believe is going to take care of the matter and truly involve the public in the process forevermore. With that said, Madam Chair, I'd like to move to postpone AR 2009-221 indefinitely.
Is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition to postponement? Seeing none, that's postponed indefinitely. All right. I'm going to try to do one more, and then I'll call for the individuals one more time.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
State your point.
Does that include the S version, I'm assuming?
I would assume so.
I mean, you moved the other, but I just want to be clear. Thank you.
All right. We're now then at 13B. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open a public hearing on AO 115. This is an ordinance amending code, Chapter 640 on reports and audits. The sponsor's already indicated that he intends to move to continue. However, you're still able to speak to this if you would like. So anyone who'd like to talk to us about reports and audits, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, may I close the hearing, Mr. Klayman?
With the understanding that I'm going to move to postpone.
Well, the motion is to continue or to close. So.
I'll move to continue the public hearing until the next time we meet on it.
All right.
To what date?
Yeah. And first meeting in January.
Thank you.
1/12.
January 12th.
All right. Is there objection to continue?
Just a question, if I might, of the sponsor.
Sure.
Is this going to be the vehicle for the things you've been talking about? Are you figuring, is that why you're putting it off for that?
Exactly. We wanted to bring this in front of the Budget and Finance Committee. I just touched base with Mr. Wheeler. That's why I didn't hear them call for the people who were the public appearance request to make sure that he's comfortable working with me to basically come up with an S version that satisfies what he believes needs to be included for reporting, make sure it satisfies what we, the Assembly, needs to be included in, and frankly avoid what I alluded to earlier, that I don't think we should have a reporting requirement that means hiring 10 people who report to us weekly about every little minutia about how.
Well, I think I agree with that, but here's mine was a timing question, and it's this. If it's going to the Finance and Budget Committee first, and then Mr. Wheeler, and then we're going to bring it back on the 12th of January? Is that enough time? That's the reason I asked that question.
I have to interrupt. The clerk informs me there was no second.
Oh, second. Well, it shows L.V. Gray here.
I'm sorry. I was relying on my clerk. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I pardon my interruption.
Anyway, my question is that it just, we're going to, I don't want to, we've got these continuing, they always take time.
Mr. Coffey, I think your comments are actually very well taken, and I'm cognizant Christmas break is upon us. So why don't we, instead of making it January 12th, unless the chair objects, I'll modify the motion so that it would be, I guess, January, the last meeting in January is the 19th? Yeah, let's make it the 19th. That's fine.
If I could just interrupt for a second to ask, has the Finance Committee going to have a chance to meet by then?
We're scheduled to meet on the 17th of December.
And you can talk about this at that point.
Yes, and
okay.
My goal will be to meet with Mr. Wheeler in advance of that, so we hopefully have an S version by that.
All right. So I'm sorry, that was the what date? The
19th of January for the continued public hearing.
All right. At this time, the motion before us is to continue to the 19th. Is there any objection to that? Hearing and seeing none, we're continued to the 19th. Ms. Gray-Jackson, I'm sorry, were you wanting to speak on the continuation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not on the continuation, just on the fact that my ordinance on the same subject, I postponed until the 12th, and I'd hate to see that brought up on the 12th when it's on the same subject.
Understood.
Madam Chair, I'll move to reconsider the postpone of the Ms. Gray-Jackson's. Or actually move for reconsideration for the purpose of postponing
Thank you very much.
for a week.
All right. Is there any objection to reconsideration for the purpose stated? Seeing none. That was on the previous one, which was number 11B. Yes.
Then I'll move to continue the public hearing.
Just a second on that. All right. So the reconsideration is also for the closing of the public hearing, both? Because I did close the public hearing on that one.
It already was closed.
It already was closed. Okay. Never mind then. The motion was specifically for reconsideration for the purpose of changing the postponement date. Yes. Is there objection? Okay. Seeing none, we've got this back before us. So now I need a motion for the correct date.
So moved for the 19th.
Second.
Is there objection? Seeing none, now we've changed the date to the 19th. Thank you for doing that, Mr. Clayman. All right. I'm going to, Mr. Flynn, I'm sorry. All right. I'm now going to one more time ask for the people who signed up to speak on non-agenda items. Is Miss Angela Bourgeorn here? Is Mr. Tony Wilkerson here? Okay. All right. The next item before us is 13C. At this point, I'm going to open the public hearing on AR 254. This is a resolution accepting and appropriating the State of Alaska 2009 legislative grants per Senate Bill 75. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to us on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Discussion? Dr. Sokrig?
Strategy for this item was, when we talked at the beginning of the meeting, your strategy was to postpone it, but what was your suggested date?
No, it wasn't this one, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Withdraw.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you. A quick question, I think, to Mr. Wheeler. It is my understanding that the Alaska Cruise Association has, or several of the cruise companies have filed suit over the utilization of cruise ship head tax monies for projects that are not specifically in harbors or around harbors. I don't know if you have any familiarity with that lawsuit, and if so, what risk you think the $1 million for the Egan Center, which, by the way, I fully support, might be.
Point of order, Madam Chair. If Mr.
State
Flynn
your
is,
point.
I'm about to. If Mr. Flynn is concerned about litigation and the potential impacts, I would prefer that we discuss that otherwise than in a public session, perhaps, as a suggestion.
I thought I heard Mr. Flynn asking if potentially this is in jeopardy, which seemed a pertinent question to me. Mr. Wheeler, is there any problem with answering that question?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Flynn, I think I can answer the question, although not very helpfully. I am somewhat familiar with the lawsuit, but I have not prepared any information for you with respect to whether there's going to be or potentially going to be an impact. So if you want to give us some time to look at that issue and get back to you, I'd be happy to do that.
That's fine. I'm okay approving it tonight. It's just sort of a, the state appropriated the money. The fund's source was cruise ship head tax dollars. If, as a result of the lawsuit, they weren't allowed to appropriate those dollars, presumably it would be the state's responsibility to make them up somewhere else. But if you could provide some commentary for us in the future, I would appreciate it.
So, do we want to add?
Will do. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Coffey.
My concern was the question of once we appropriate, we will undoubtedly spend, and then will that be our concern about repayment? That's what worried me, and I would that was what the thought that went through my mind that led me to worry about making that inquiry here to give away something that might otherwise be better said in executive session.
I understand now.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this matter's before us. Is there seeing no further discussion, is there any objection? Hearing and seeing no objection, the matter is approved unanimously. All right, moving on then to 13D. This is AO 125. This is an ordinance authorizing renewal of an exclusive use permit to the United States Coast Guard for some lots in the port. If you would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve. Second.
Mr. Flynn.
Can we get a boat out of this, too?
Pardon me?
Can we get a boat out of this, too? Sorry, I withdraw the question.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, is there objection to approval of this lease, of this permit?
This thing is so sticky on my teeth.
Hearing and seeing no objection, that matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 13E. This is AO 124, an ordinance authorizing disposal of HLB parcel 5026, Lot 1, Kincaid West subdivision to the Anchorage School District. Does anybody want to speak to us on this matter? If so, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, this matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 13F. This is AR 255, a resolution appropriating $200,000 from U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs. Thank you. This is basically for the purpose of continuation of the Alaska Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. If you want to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, this matter is approved unanimously. We're now at 13G on the agenda. I'd like to open the public hearing on AR 266. This is a resolution appropriating $142,725 from the state of Alaska. I think I have to say the dollar figures, and appropriating $6,098 for the impaired driving enforcement program in the police department. Anybody want to speak to us on this? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve. Second.
Is there discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mr. Coffey.
At some point in time, when I read these, I would love to see that 90% of the money is not allocated to overtime. The cost of overtime to us is substantial, particularly in the retirement benefits. We pay and pay and pay. There's got to be a better way. I don't know what it is, but we've got an imaginative staff and the administration. I hope we can find a way. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
It seems to me when we had inquiry about this, it had to do with not hiring an additional person to do the job. And it's cheaper. I guess I'm asking the administration, looking at the number of overtimes we've approved, is it really cheaper to do it this way in the long run? Who can answer this? I mean, I think we've asked this question a couple times, and the answer over and over again has been, well, it's cheaper to approach it this way than to hire an additional staff person to address the multiple overtime issues we have.
Right. Through the Chair, Dr. Selgwig, the intent and purpose of these particular grants, these are the two A-STEP, as they're called, traffic grants to the state, is that they are for, and the terminology is additional enforcement. So it isn't as much a matter of hiring another person to do it or not. It's that the intent of this vehicle, of this grant, is that it goes for enforcement above and beyond what our on-duty forces do. It's intended to be overtime enforcement.
Couldn't we hire an above and beyond position? I mean, the thing is it actually intended to be paid at a double rate?
Well, not double. We avoid the use of double time for it, but a time and a half.
A time and a half.
Right. The grants are periodic, so I don't know if you would want to support another full-time FTE based on that.
It would be worth looking at that, I think. It would be worth looking maybe at the last 5 years. I mean, not, assuming, what's the average kind of year look like in grants? I know we're getting more with the stimulus money, but, and would it make sense to hire an additional person to do the grant-related activities? I mean, it seems to me it is a really expensive way to go about addressing this, and Mr. Coffey raised it. I had the same thought when I looked at it, and if there's any opportunity here to use this money a little more wisely, I guess, has the administration already looked into this?
We'll look at it.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Coffey?
What that says to me is we've got 5 officers doing this work. And rather than taking an officer who's doing some other work and assigning him to this responsibility and paying him straight time, we're going to have those same 5 officers do more of the same and pay them overtime. And I understand why that might work sometimes, because the others are busy doing whatever it is they do. But what troubles me is I know how we build our long-term costs very much, substantially, by using overtime. It costs us a lot of money, and it would seem that wisdom would say, rather than just assume overtime and pay it that way time after time after time, that we say, well, wait a minute, maybe we can use this extra money for extra enforcement by taking 2 people out of Division 3 and put them over here in Division 1 and let them add that and get paid regular time. I don't know if that works or not. I've never administered a police force, but it seems to me, because of the cost, it might be worth looking at. And I would ask Mr. Vakelis if he could do that with your cooperation.
We'll look into it.
Thank you.
Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that this comment actually isn't directed at the acting chief, but he can certainly chime in. I hope that when we start talking about requiring identification for purchase of liquor here in the next few months as we work on this ordinance, that we look at trying to cut the number of people driving DUI so we don't have to spend this money, this overtime money, in stopping them when they're actually out in their cars and endangering lives and property. And anything we can do to educate and would help educate, this is going to be part of it. Hopefully we'll be working with legislatures. There's apparently a move to get marks, to get driver's licenses marked for DUI, repeat DUI offenders, and the first DUI offender has to get a mark on their licenses. All of those things need to work in concert to help prevent us from having to spend this money. But in the meantime, if this is how we have to do it, then this is how we have to do it. So thank you.
I don't think that was a specific question.
No, it wasn't.
Okay. It was just debate. And Dr. Selkirk, go ahead.
I just want to say I am appreciative of the amount of work that the police get done with the number of people you have. I don't think I have expectations of squeezing a lot out of the rock, in terms of, I don't think that there's just people sitting around that could be applied here. I'm really wondering if we don't have a consistent income associated with grants that could be better spent and actually maybe more done, we could do more with it if we weren't paying a time and a half. So I'd be grateful for some.
I don't think we have any more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there appears to be no further discussion. Is there opposition to approval? Seeing none, this matter is approved unanimously. I'm going to do one more and then we'll take our break. I'd like to open the public hearing on 13H. This is AR 256. It's a resolution appropriating $1,462,556
Waive reading.
for the WIC program. Anybody like to speak to us on this matter? On the WIC program, Mr.
Yeah, I know a lot about WIC. Madam Chair, because WIC is a budget item, and so budget items are very important in how this assembly addresses budget items, and so that's why I wanted to make my comments towards WIC and budget items tonight. And it also kind of reminds me about some of the testimony or some of the words that were said earlier when Mr. Gutierrez referred to the municipal attorney as "I don't trust you," and got pretty personal on that.
On the WIC program.
Well, I know, and so it all goes back to trust and the WIC program and the budgets, you see, Madam Chair. And I think Mr. Gutierrez is a punk, okay?
Sir, you're not,
because, see, and it all goes back to trust. And for shame on Mr. Gutierrez for looking at that municipal attorney over there and saying such things, because it goes back to trust and the public confidence in our budget process, and especially when it comes to WIC.
No personal attacks, Mr. Burke.
And that's what I thought, was pretty important, is that, as we into politics and radio, we can talk about one another, but when a politician takes on a sitting, dedicated municipal employee and refers to him as "I don't trust you," that just reminded me of somebody that's a punk. And I just wanted to make that clear. So I hope that you'll use that when you come up with your budget ideas for WIC.
Point of order, Madam Chair. This is inappropriate. Thank you, Mr.
He
Burke.
has skirted this. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burke. We're done. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to us on the WIC program? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Mr. Coffey, you want to speak to this? We can't hear you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's not a nickel's worth of overtime in this appropriation.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. All right. Seeing no further discussion.
I had a comment,
Mr.
ma'am.
Starr, go ahead.
Some time back, we talked about what the city's role was for our general population in a passing comment. I think Dr. Selkirk actually brought it forth. And this, to me, indicates where the state's reimbursing the city to do functions. And this is a pass-through grant, probably comes ultimately from the federal government, passed through the state to us as implementers of that. And I'm concerned that twofold is as we start to incur future budget cuts, reductions in services that the city can offer. Granted, this is a pass-through grant and it's somebody else's money that we're spending. The problem is we continue to provide expectations to our populace that we're going to keep doing these things. And I find real caution in that as we start to see grants and pass-through dollars, we may want to reject a few of them and say, not our job description. And this isn't one of them. It's women, infant, and children's. That's what WIC stands for. It's real appropriate. I notice we're not buying any infant formulas or anything like that with this. We're funding labor and clinic work. But my point in that, and I'll urge the approval of it for that, but we need to get back to core services of what government is. And I'm not saying this one isn't one of them, but we pass through a lot of money given to the feds, to the state, that grows government or keeps going in a direction that we service the population. It may not be Anchorage-driven folks themselves. This is an example of that, $1 million worth. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in queue, is there any objection to accepting this grant? And, well, it's not only accepting, is it? It's also appropriating. Seeing no objection, that matter is approved. We're now going to take our dinner break. It'll be about 20 minutes. We are in recess.
Madam Chair, point of personal privilege.
Go ahead, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure Mr. Wheeler was in the room. You know, I wasn't going to speak earlier, and you remember when you were in high school and you were taking the standardized tests and the teacher told you, go with your first instinct? My first instinct was not to speak on an issue earlier, and I should have followed that. Mr. Wheeler and I have spoken, but I do want to publicly apologize to him. I let my temper get a little bit the better of me, and I do apologize, and I'm sincerely sorry. I'm not, I'm still fairly angry. What's the right way to put it? I should have gone and spoken to him about why I was angry, and I will. Mr. Wheeler graciously offered to meet with me and open his door, and I'm going to call him tomorrow, and I will take advantage of that, and I respect that, and I do appreciate that. Mr. Burke I spoke with earlier, I was reminded that I used to have a job like his some years ago, and sometimes old habits die hard. I'm not in that job anymore, so I shouldn't speak as if I am. But again, Mr. Wheeler, I am sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just want to say that one of the things that I've been working toward, and I think the Assembly does a fairly good job, and we have very diverse opinions in this body. Occasionally we screw up, and we don't stick to the topic. We go into character, and I'm really going to try hard to watch so I can remind us all on that one on a regular basis. So thank you for that. All right. The next item before us is item 13I. So at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing on 13I. This is AR 257. It's appropriating $976,890 for family planning services.
Reading.
Anyone like to speak to us on that? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
To approve.
Second. Discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 13J. This is AR 260. This is appropriating $296,714 from U.S. HUD and $252,225 from HFC
Reading.
for the Link Homeless Assistance Program. So if anyone would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 13K, and if you recall, this item was bifurcated. So the only matter before us now is the second part of that bifurcation, which would be Title 21 off-street parking and loading and exterior lighting. And there will be a motion to continue this. But if you would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is continued till January 19th. Is that correct?
You don't need a motion?
You don't need a motion.
That
would be the motion.
If that's acceptable.
Second.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Seeing no objection, then it's continued. All right, the next item before us is 14A. This is AM 576. It's an appointment to the Employee Relations Board. If anybody would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward.
No, well, it's not a public hearing item, really,
Well,
Madam. It's just on their, it's delay for the 10-day public comment period. So, move to approve.
Is there objection? Seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. I'd now like to open the public hearing for AO 131. This is authorizing a lease for the use and maintenance of telecommunication facilities, Track A2 Brindlewood Subdivision to ACS. Would you like to speak? Anyone like to speak to us about this matter? This is AO 131. Hearing and seeing no one, public
Move
hearing.
to approve.
Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. We're now at 14C. This is AO 132. It's an ordinance authorizing disposal of, or by sale of about 9 acres of municipality AWWU property, Track 4 International East Subdivision, to Chugach Electric Association. Anybody like to speak to us on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Is there objection?
Madam Chair, I think
I'm sorry, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize. I probably should have posed this question in an email. Is this associated with the SCAP project? Yeah, is Posey still around, or Mr. Primo?
I think Mr. Primo's coming down.
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, it actually has two associations, to make it perfectly clear. Further on your agenda is a parcel of land that Chugach also owns, that we need desperately for a reservoir site up in southeast Anchorage, and that is item 14F. And what we did was, when we approached Chugach on 14F, on that parcel of land, they indicated they had an interest in the Minnesota land. It has no value to the utility as an asset, so we were selling them for that reason. My understanding is that they want to acquire it for a staging area for the proposed construction of that engine generating facility, if it ever goes through.
Is this a straight trade then, or we're going
No, there are two separate transactions, two separate and totally independent transactions, but from a negotiating perspective, we linked them together for negotiating purposes. Both transactions are fair market value.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Primo.
Anything else, Mr. Flynn? Any further discussion?
Move to approve.
Yeah, the motion's already out there, I believe. That was me, too. Is there objection then? Hearing and, yes, yeah. The motion has been made and seconded. And is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us, I just lost my place. Are we 14D? This is AO 136. I'd like to open the public hearing for an ordinance authorizing and providing for the borrowing from the State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $15,548,000 for the purpose of financing various AWWU water capital improvement projects. If you'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve. You've got to clear the board.
And Ms. Drummond, did you second?
Yeah, I'd like to second.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Akalis.
item D needs to be postponed until after the budget's approved.
All right. I'd like a motion to do that, if I could.
Move to postpone.
Second.
Till December 15th?
What date?
Post-budget.
We're hoping that will be post-budget.
Do you want to? Okay.
All right. Was that what
Yes.
your motion?
Yes,
Thank
the
you.
15th.
And acceptable to the second? Is there objection to postponing this to December 15th? Hearing and seeing none, this is postponed till December 15th. Thank you. We're now I'd like to open the public hearing on 14E. This is AO 137. This is an ordinance authorizing and providing for the borrowing from the Clean Water Fund an amount.
Waive reading.
Okay, well, I think I have to read $6,206,400 for AWU wastewater capital improvement. Anybody like to speak to us on this topic? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing.
Move to approve.
Second.
Does the administration want us to also do that in this?
Please.
Move to continue to the 15th.
Postpone, right? We closed the public hearing already.
Yeah, the public hearing's closed. Postpone decision until the 15th.
Second.
Is there objection to postponing this till the 15th? Hearing and seeing none, this matter is postponed to the 15th. The next item before us is 14F. This is AO 138, an ordinance authorizing acquisition of property by AWWU, about a 2-acre portion of Lot 1A, Block 1, Kinnick Heights Subdivision West, a fair market value not to exceed $216,000 from Chugach Electric for a public water reservoir. If anybody would like to speak to us on this, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 14G. This is AO 129. This is an ordinance amending Code 11-70060 to increase existing fares on the public transportation system, increasing bus fares. This item, there's already been some discussion. This item will be postponed, but if you'd like to speak to us, you're certainly welcome to. Come on down.
Yes, ma'am. I thank the chair. My name is Mike Rogers. I live here in Anchorage, registered voter, I might add, and forgive me. I did take a moment to glance at the addendum, Madam Chair, and noticed that there was an S version. And as we update ourselves within moments of getting an opportunity to speak, which seems to be something interesting that happens here. There's S versions that come suddenly flying out of the woodwork. There's decisions made that we're going to postpone this item, but since I came here tonight to plead for keeping our bus fares as they are, I thought I would touch briefly on something that's happened repeatedly. I watched a little bit of it on TV last night, as a matter of fact. I don't really care who is a socialist 6 or a fascist 5. What part of calling each other names has anything to do with making the buses available to our citizenry? And no, I don't think any person on the Assembly is a punk. I did, however, plan tonight to speak to you about keeping our buses and our service at its current level and at its current pricing. And as I left the house today, I did one thing. It was so much easier when it was red versus blue. You can't really tell what's going on sometimes, but this time I decided to wear what I personally consider the ultimate color political statement: gray plaid. Let us keep that color in mind as we consider in the future saving our bus service and preserving the opportunity for people to be able to go to and from where they must be. Personally, one little anecdote sometimes helps us remember what's going on out there. 2 days in a row last week I had no bus service, which meant I had a very bad Friday walking across town. These decisions are real. People are real. Feelings are real. And I would like to urge everyone to maintain civility, even if it isn't particularly entertaining. I thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Good
Madam
comment.
Chair.
Basically, if I could just interject, the reason that we're postponing is because there will be budget amendments about this item. So we didn't want to make some decision we'd have to maybe undo later.
Heaven forfend. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, hold on. There are some people who want to talk to you. Dr. Stumpy.
I appreciate you coming down, and the fact is the decision isn't done, so your testimony is completely appropriate. And I also want to say thank you to your comments about civility. I think the hardest and most shocking thing for me serving as a public servant has been moments when, just because we're sitting on this side of kind of the podium, we're accused of things that actually have nothing to do with who we are. And it worries me. The tension and the anger worries me and makes me think as a community it is not a healthy thing. So I'm really appreciative that you commented on it, and I wanted to say thank you.
Through the chair, you're welcome, Assembly Member Selkirk. And I can't help but remember that just today, I believe it was, I saw comments on one of the political television channels talking about a former mayor of New York City, a Republican, who said there is no Republican way to fix potholes.
That's right.
This is a nonpartisan municipal assembly. Civility should go hand in hand, and little things sometimes count.
Okay. Mr. Flynn wants to talk to you, too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming down, sir. And not to belabor the socialist versus fascist argument, however, I believe it was Mussolini who headed the fascist party and came to power based on making the trains run on time. I appreciate your comments. Just so you know, the S version basically obviates all of the proposed fare increases, except it eliminates the availability of 2-for-1 passes for nonprofits. The S version was brought forth because several of us have been working on an S version of the budget that would restore some funding to People Mover service to try and maintain the service that we have at the rates that we have. And the administration correctly wants to see how that plays out before we take final action on this, as the chair indicated. And the final item I would mention is, as someone who strives to be the most boring member of this body, it disturbs me to know I now have to get a new wardrobe, gray plaid. Do you know where I could pick something up?
I would urge you to haunt the resale shops as I do. Those of us who have modest incomes do that almost obsessively. I don't want to recall too much of my latest shopping spree last night. But I ended up I owe you an apology, Assemblymember Flynn. Here a while back I mentioned to you that I thought I would be living in your district soon. I, in fact, did not. I have moved instead to the Midtown area, and I believe my two members are Assemblymembers Gray Jackson and Assemblymember Coffey, who I believe would like to know my opinions about keeping our bus service intact, and if that S version is necessary to save $125,000 seems rather minuscule in an overall perspective, and I wonder which social service agencies and nonprofits would be most injured by that. So I would look forward to discussion from them, should they have an opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And
you're welcome. Thank you.
10 lashes with a wet noodle for not moving into my district.
I think your mother will be more angry than I can imagine.
Ms. Gray-Jack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for coming out. And I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that I'm your representative. And I want you to know how much I do now, and I've always supported public transit. My first job with the municipality was at public transit, and I rode the bus for many, 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 many years. So thank you for coming out, and I will support putting back as much public transit as I can get the votes to support it with me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comment. Anything else I might note?
You've got it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one. Public hearing. Now, I'm not sure if I should continue.
Move to continue the public hearing to
Thank you.
12/15, December 15.
Okay. All right. And can I assume that that's also for the S version?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right. The motion is to continue both this and the S version until, I'm sorry, Mr. Flynn, to December 15th.
Thank you.
All right. And that was seconded by Mr. Coffey. Is there any objection to that? Hearing and seeing none, those matters are continued on till the 15th. All right. The next item before us is 14H. This is AO 126. It's an ordinance adopting the Turnagain Arm Comprehensive Plan. And if you would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Come on down.
Hi, my name is Debbie Redmond. I live out Indian at mile 103. And I was just wondering what part of the highway they were talking about on this Turnagain plan.
It covers the whole, it does not include Girdwood, and then it goes all the way to, what's the northernmost part, Mr. Weaver? It includes Portage, but it goes further north than Portage, doesn't it? I'm looking to the administration.
Madam Chair, the plan covers the area from the south end of Powder Marsh to Portage.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. What it is, they were talking about at one time putting a highway frontage in front of mile 103, and I was just wondering if they were still doing that.
It would not be the city that would be doing that.
It would be the highway.
I think we'll talk about that and we'll ask that question. Do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
That was it.
Okay. Is there anybody who has information on that highway project? Staff?
Yeah, Madam Chair, the highway project is in two parts, and it's a design study right now. It covers, there's a north end project and the south end project, and the north end goes from Potter Marsh to approximately Indian. And then the second study is at the south end, close to 20 Mile River from Girdwood south.
And if you could state your name for the record, please.
I'm Theed Tobish with the Planning Department.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would just have to contact the state in reference to more of the information on it?
Mr. Tobish?
Yes, Madam Chair, the state, Alaska DOT, is doing both of those studies. So yes, they have a contractor doing studies.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone else like to talk to us about this plan? Do you want to talk to us about the plan? If so, come forward. This is your chance. No? Okay. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Push the button. Second.
Ms. Johnston, I know you have some amendments.
I have 3 amendments. The first one is, yes, and I've given you copies. Yeah. Everybody has copies of these amendments? We do. And the first one is Section 1, and it's A of Section 1. And it says, retain the industrial classification of U.S. Survey 3200, Lot 10, in parentheses D, Indian Valley Meats property on the Indian Land Use Plan. And the second is B, change the land use on U.S. Survey 3201, Lot 20 in Bird Creek.
Are we doing these independently?
To Turnagain Arm mixed use, which reflects traditional land use at this site from prior to the area-wide rezone.
All right, so your amendment was just both A and B.
Right.
Right.
Motion, so we can have a second.
That was, I took that as a motion.
Second, that was a motion.
All right. Would you like to speak to it?
These are correcting legal descriptions, and I've actually spent some time with folks from Indian and Bird on these, and I feel very comfortable with the descriptions.
All right, Mr. Starr?
Not for the amendments to the main body. So.
Okay. Dr. Sokrick?
I just was curious if the staff had any comments on the amendments.
Madam Chair, Ms. Selkirk, these are amendments we've worked with Ms. Johnson on in correcting some minor errors and omissions that we discovered in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Flynn on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure I'm clear, I see a small change in paragraph A, and paragraph B remains the exact same as in the original draft. Is that correct?
Oh, I've got this. Right.
Is that to the administration or Ms. Johnson?
Doesn't matter.
Mr. Wilbur, do you know? Mr.
think you mean Weaver.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Mr. Weaver. I apologize. Or Mr. Tobish?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Flynn? All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing and seeing none, is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing none, that amendment passes unanimously. Ms. Johnston?
I'd like to do these 2 amendments together. That's all right. And one is on the plan document, page 45. And I'd like to add a new strategy bullet, and it says rezone 10 private PLI parcels in Portage to conform to the new land use designation of the 2009 Turnagain Arm Comprehension Plan.
Second.
I did.
Oh,
Could you
just a
restate that?
minute,
I couldn't hear that very well.
I'd like to move them both together, Mr. Coffey.
Yeah, so if you could hold on that second until she finishes making the motion, please.
And then on the plan document, page 75, add a new implementation action to the implementation action and schedule table. And I don't think I need to read all that out. You each have copies of that.
Second.
All right, discussion on the amendment. Ms. Solcraig, do you have any discussion? No. Okay.
And again, these were amendments that I worked with the planning staff with and have spent quite a bit of time with people in the area on this.
All right. I've got this one. Is there any, seeing no discussion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that amendment is passed unanimously. And Ms. Johnson, anything else?
Just I urge approval of the comprehensive plan. I think it leaves, as I say, I've spent time with members in different aspects of the communities. There are still some issues that are outstanding. I think all of you have received emails as far as Portage. I think if you look at the plan, you'll see that it's been suggested that Portage develop a master plan, and I've suggested that to each of the folks that I've spoken with there, and that this plan allows for further development in all of the areas along the arm. I feel it's a good plan, and I urge to passage.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And specifically, I forget the name of the woman who contacted me, but the concern that she voiced was the size of the lots and the requirements therein. Are you comfortable, Ms. Johnson, that we've addressed that concern or can address it with approval of this document?
Yes, the concern was to keep the zoning as is, and it hasn't changed. The zoning is still R11 for the 5-acre lots. The woman from Portage would like to add that you could have 2 houses in a R11, and I think that she will need to further work with the planning staff on that, because I would not like to change that zoning for the whole ARM plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I had.
Mr. Birch.
Yeah, I would speak in support of this as well. Some of you might remember when we had an issue with a young man that actually worked at, I think he worked at the Double Muskie in Girdwood and had a parcel down there, and this will move towards rectifying that. He was in a PLI zone, I remember, and was having some great complications in trying to reside on his property. So I think this is a good comprehensive document. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but I think it's largely there and ready for approval. Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
On page 44, it speaks to bringing the area into the building service or building safety area. And I wondered if there had been much testimony to what that actually means from the public, to community councils in particular, where you bring it into the BSA. We see obligations, and it's a near-term strategy as well on page 75. Near-term strategy is supported obviously by the administration. So what I see is a trend towards, I assume they do a land use type of arrangement, but the strategy through the administration is to start to bring them into the planning and zoning and the overall improvements that the BSA oversight requires, building inspections and all of that. Are we prepared as an administration to staff to that level if we bring that requirement into being? It seems like we're growing government.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, the interest in that item you mentioned came from the community. They actually voiced a lot of concern about the lack of basic code enforcement, especially in Indian and Bird Creek.
Well, code enforcement is a little bit different than compliance into the building safety model, which requires construction inspections and plan reviews at a higher and greater level, and implementation of that inspection programs, and it can be deemed burdensome on the developers or those that are used to not having that oversight. I'm fully comfortable with the code enforcement but they're free to do that now down there as a requirement for the municipality. But building safety movement, to me, I have a note of caution about expanding that when the city's not ready to hold up its side of the bargain. Can we do it? I mean, if we go to the near-term goal here to expand the oversight and the on-site inspections and well and septic and all the other things that go with it, are we ready?
Madam Chair, Mr. Starr, basically this is a strategy within the plan that some of the citizens of the area expressed interest in pursuing. Obviously would take additional process to make that happen, to bring it into the building safety service area, but it's basically a strategy at this point in time.
I mean, you classify in page 75 your strategies for near term, and I think there's actually another footnote that speaks to something else. The parentheses planning. I don't quite know what the parentheses in planning on page 75 is for the feasibility study and the association of that. It's just the direction that I think if we approve it, we ought to let the community know they'll be ready for increased fees and all the other stuff that goes with it.
Madam Chair, Mr. Starr, basically the intent for the near term for planning to do that was to continue to evaluate that with the community to see if that was really what they were interested in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Osiander?
I have two clarifying points. One, it's my belief that they would have to vote to go into the building service area. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Madam Chairman, that's correct.
All right. And then the secondary concern I had is I also talked several times to Ms. Blackburn from Portage, and this morning I talked to her again, and she specifically asked why Tidelands was not included as wordage in discussing shoreline areas. She has a belief that that word is important and gives specific rights on federal lands. Was it specifically excluded?
Madam Chair, I think you're referring to this. There's a couple strategies about providing public access to beaches.
Yes, sir.
That was an oversight at most. It wasn't discussed.
Is it problematic to include?
Not at all.
I hate to do this on a plan not in my district, but if there's no objection, I'd like to include the word Tidelands at the specific request of Ms. Blackburn.
Where and what?
Now, Mr. Tobish, could you help where that would be? She talked about it in general through in shoreline areas, and her concern was access.
Let's deal with her access.
She believed that there were some specific guidelines in the federal legislation.
Madam Chair, would you like to move to another item, give them 5 minutes to do that, and then come back to it?
Can we ever make that?
I would appreciate that.
I make that motion. We take up the next item and return to it when staff can include your amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
All right. Let's then move ahead and do a different one and then come back to this. We're now at 14I. This is AO 133. It's an ordinance repealing Code 1215.012 and 1215.015 to codify state law exemptions on filing deadlines and outlining administrative and judicial appeal processes. This relates to tax exemptions. So if anybody would like to speak to us on this, with the understanding that this one is going to be continued. Anybody at all? Hearing and seeing no one. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move to continue the public hearing to the meeting of December 15th.
Second.
Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, this matter is continued to December 15th.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I
point.
might have missed it. Did the S version get introduced on the addendum,
No, sir,
or
it did not. If you recall, we specifically did not.
Okay, I thought that's what we were going to do, but I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Right. The next item before us is AO 134. This is an omnibus ordinance amending code and Code of Regulations to authorize electronic online publication in lieu of newspaper publication of notices. There is some
Madam
interest. I have to open the public hearing. But I was going to announce there's probably going to be a motion to continue. If anybody would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. This is basically moving from newspaper advertising to online advertising of meetings.
Madam Chair, I move to continue the public hearing.
All right. The motion before us is to continue public hearing till January 10th? Is that all right?
Yeah, I think 12th is the
12th?
meeting date.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
12th.
Madam Chair?
Just a minute, is there a second to that?
Second.
I'm sorry. Mr. Michaelis?
Yes, I passed out, and I believe the clerk has an amendment that deals with the school district on there.
We're not taking it up yet.
Are you on the same?
So it's provided for our information for when we do take it up?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
So we're going to, the motion is to continue.
The motion is to continue. The clerk has those, and she will pass them out at a later point, because if this is approved, we'll deal with this on January 12th.
Well, thank you.
Okay? Is there objection to dealing with this on January 12th? Hearing and seeing none, then matter is continued January 12th, and the clerk will pass out the amendments that Mr. Michaelis has suggested we deal with at that time to address school district concerns.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
State your point.
Could we get an S version perhaps from the administration so we don't have to deal with documents on the issue? It's just cleaning up what they can, so they can do it too, I understand.
We'll do that.
It's a very straightforward amendment according to the clerk. All right. And the request to continue did not come from the administration, by the way. Okay. At this point,
Did we vote on that?
I heard no objection to continuation. Are you ready, Mr. Weaver?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
All right. At this point, then, I'd like to go back to 14H, the Turnagain Arm Comprehensive Plan, and I'm going to hand the gavel to Mr. Drummond.
Okay, Ms. Hosiander.
I just would like the place recommendation from Mr. Tobish or Mr. Weaver.
Madam Chairman, members of the Assembly, I'm not sure that it's necessary, because if you go to page 46 of the plan under policies, second bullet in the middle of the page, it says provide safe, formal public access to Turnagain Arm beaches and wildlife viewing opportunities across Alaska Railroad land in specific areas, and including tidelands after perhaps beaches. Tidelands were not, there may or may not be ownership rights to those tidelands, and I'm not sure with the person that that you spoke to has tideland properties, so I'm not sure that her property would be impacted with this kind of amendment. I'm not sure it's necessary.
Ms. Hosiander?
Well, I certainly don't know either. Basically, her firm belief was that there are federal regulations specifically for the term tidelands that are important to access. I guess I'm unsure how to proceed. You basically think that it's a moot point, is that correct? Mr. Weaver?
Madam Chair, it's certainly not going to obviate the federal regulations. If there are regulations that allow that access, this plan is not going to diminish that. But I'm not sure, recognizing in the plan, I'm not sure if it has any substance to it. I don't see it as necessary, but I don't see it as
All right, at this point,
adding value.
I'm going to advise against it based on the planning department's recommendation.
Wait. Mr. Coffey, you raised your hand. Was it on this particular issue? Because I do have you in the queue.
Screen, and I would ask that we allow that motion to be withdrawn without objection.
Is that acceptable? Okay.
You've got it.
I have Mr. Flynn and Mr. Coffey in the queue. Well, Mr. Coffey, you're out.
I'm out.
I was just going to say, maybe putting people in the tidelands while in Turnagain Arm isn't a good idea, but I'll just skip that.
Okay, so the request has been withdrawn. Any objection to was there a second that needs to approve the withdrawal of the motion? Okay. So that this is not changing.
All right.
According to tidelines. There you go.
Okay. So since there was no objection to that motion be withdrawn, that's the case. Now we've got the main motion before us as amended. Is there any further discussion on the Turnagain Arm plan? Hearing and seeing none, is there any objection to adoption of the Jernigan Arm Plan as amended? Hearing and seeing none, that plan is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. The next item before us is 14K. This is AR 279. It's a resolution appropriating $625,000 as a memorandum of agreement from the state DOT
Waive reading.
to the
Mr.
police
Flynn
budget
forgot.
for reimbursable police services at road construction sites. Anybody who'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Starr?
No, I hate to belabor the point, but it was a question I raised earlier to the chief, acting chief here, was the amount of police support that we gave to the Glen Highway repaving project. I drive that a fair amount. In any given time, I probably saw 10 squads oftentimes doing traffic controls at various times of the day. Is this trying to make up for some of those contributions of our staff labor? Is that what's going to be included in this, or do you go back to DOT and ask them to reevaluate how much time we did contribute? And the reason I bring it up is there was a lot of overruns and time. There was a lot of time spent that wasn't in our control, meaning they had trouble getting the striping crews to show up. They had delays in paving due to contractors, and we would show up and then we'd leave. We'd show up and then we'd leave in terms of a police cruiser. How do you get paid for that sort of ineptness? Is this to do it, this contribution, or are we needing to go back to DOT for other job site things?
Through the chair? Through the chair, Mr. Starr, yes, this does recompense, or this does cover all of our costs from the reimbursed services that we provided to DOT during this summer construction season. They're very forthcoming with it, and they do cover our costs fully loaded to include benefits. It's just that the previous version of the memorandum of agreement with them only allowed up to $250,000 worth of work, and they had a lot of projects. It went beyond that, but they covered it all through this action.
And I guess through the chair, what do you bill per hour for a cruiser with a man in it and on overtime? What's your rate?
It's $110 an hour.
Includes the car idling and all
Correct.
that stuff? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, this item is approved unanimously. The next item before us is 14L, AR 280. This is a resolution appropriating $179,990.
Move reading.
And $7,694 from the police for the purchase of automated external defibrillators. If anybody would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward.
Move to approve.
There's a public hearing still open. Uh-oh. I guess not.
We're getting anxious.
Yeah. Hearing and seeing no one. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Coffey?
Second. You beat me.
And the second is not recorded here, so. All right. Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is approved unanimously. That brings us to the end of our agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Well, I was going to, do you mind if I see if there's persons to be heard, or do you want to adjourn?
That's fair. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak to the Assembly on any matter?
Oh, dear.
Hearing, seeing no one?
Now I'll move to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right.
That's a short timer. I'd like to adjourn.